Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Failure Effect, a show about reclaiming the word failure and turning it into success. My name is Wayo Omuli. I will be your host. And today we're speaking to a very exciting woman. Her name is Njeri Wangari. I believe those of you who are in the blogging space would be familiar with her. She's a poet. She is the owner of AfroKids, which is a storytelling platform for children in native languages, right? She's amongst the founding members of Bake, the very first blogging celebratory platform, and which hosted the Bake Awards way back in the day. She started her blogging journey in 2005. My goodness. Were there even platforms for blogging in 2005?
There was only one that okay, there were several, but the one that was easily accessible to those of us who were not coders
Mhm.
was Blogspot. Blogspot
Right.
was the easiest because you didn't need to know a line of code for you to begin,
Uh-huh.
and that's where most of us began.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right.
Mm.
So I gather, in your story, there's a session there where business chapered you a good one. It got you.
Oh yes, oh yes, that was in 2013.
Yeah.
Yes,
But
2013.
before we get there, let's
Mm.
because I want to establish what it is, what job, what career, what income are you leaving behind in order to go into this. So let's start with where you were before you had this idea and what it is that inspired this idea that then got you to learn your lesson,
Mhm, mhm.
right?
Wow. Where to begin?
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the genesis of it all was informed by the journey that I had gone through as a poet.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned, I started poetry before I began blogging, and the reason why I got into blogging was because I was looking for a platform to publish my work. There has never been that many opportunities for poets, even even today, to get
Mm-hmm.
published. It's still a challenge. And so back then, excited about discovering the internet. I was working for an internet service provider back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
I think they've sort of gone through various name changes. Back in the day, they were called Kenya Data Networks.
Uh-huh.
Yes, and so I was in the marketing department,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the time we had we had access to the internet,
Mm-hmm.
and I discovered blogging, and that's how I began my blog.
Mm-hmm.
And so it started out as a space to publish my poetry, eventually grew to a space where I could write about my other interests, which were in arts and culture. And it is through developing an appreciation, writing and covering stories on arts and culture, that I began to sort of discover what my interests were,
Mm-hmm.
and my fascination with culture, my fascination with language, and also. And I kept going back to, the way you always have that nostalgic feeling of, oh, my childhood was the best, because I happened to be grandmother's child. I,
Uh-huh.
I was brought up by my grandmother,
Uh-huh.
and the beauty about that is that I got to learn a lot about my culture, and learn my language, my mother tongue, from my grandmother. And back then, I didn't think it was an asset until I began writing, and I would find myself being able to dip into those gems of wisdom when I was writing, and the versatility that it gave me. And so, fast forward to 2010, when I was publishing my first poetry book. It had all manner of poems. The themes that it was exploring was mostly around identity,
Uh-huh.
as this young woman who had grown up in the rural area, and had come into the city, and was just trying to find her place in this new world, and what aspects of herself does she leave behind, what aspects does she carry with her, which ones are useful and which ones can she not compromise on. And so that book, it's called Minds and Minefields, My Spoken Words, was basically an exploration of my identity and my place in society.
Mm-hmm.
It was very experimental. There are some pieces there I've written in English, some I've written in Sheng, some I've written in Kikuyu.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's around that time, in around 2010. A lot happened in 2010. So I
Uh-huh.
published the book.
Yes.
uh, I got married. We
Uh-huh.
had our wedding in March.
Uh-huh.
We had our firstborn in
Oh,
December. So
wow.
everything happened in quick succession.
Yeah.
And so being a mother was a very um, it was a I don't know how to describe it. Um there's a lot that happens to you physically, of course, but also psychologically
Yeah.
and mentally and psychologically, because then you start questioning a lot of things, and having a lot dealing with a lot of fears and self doubt.
Yeah.
What kind of a mother am I going to be? Am I going to be adequate? Do I have the tools? Do I have the knowledge to do this? And I think even as grappling with those things, then I started asking myself, and I think you also become quite philosophical. Like, now that I have an offspring, what do I leave to them?
Yeah.
Like, what do I want them to remember me for?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I began to think around the idea of I've always been fascinated by folk tales and folklore.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been in this tech space for the longest time, because when iHub was being set up, we were around. I think I even remember going for the launch of iHub, and so I had
Uh-huh.
grown up in this community of techies. And of techies and creatives.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was basically natural progression for me to look towards technology for something that I felt very deeply about, which was we are losing all these folk tales. And right, so then something happened in 2010, just to back up a bit. My grandmother in 2010, just after our wedding in March, passed on. And so she never got to meet our firstborn daughter,
Mm-hmm.
because, as I mentioned, our firstborn daughter came in December, and my grandmother passed on 2 months after our wedding. And so that brought a deep sense of loss. Not just the fact that I'd grown up with her and missing her presence, but also a deeper sense of loss in the sense that my daughter would never get to meet her grandmother, or gain the knowledge, the wisdom that I had been able to gain from her. And that, uh, and that is what sort of became the genesis uh, for Safari Tales, because I began thinking there are lots of grandmothers that are
Mm-hmm.
passing on, an older generation that are passing on, and a lot of this folklore that they they have with them, because the whole nature of African folklore is that it was shared from one generation to another through word of
Mm-hmm.
mouth. So a lot of it is not documented.
Right.
And so that is what prompted me to want to document that. And because I stood or sat at a very advantageous position. I was a creative, and I had been in this community. I was still part of this huge community of the tech space,
Mm-hmm.
and the creative space, having been a poet, and also part of the iHub community.
Mm-hmm.
That is when the idea of Safari Tales
Mm-hmm.
came about. Sorry, yes.
No,
Yeah.
I was just going to ask what format was Safari Tales going to take? Like, how were you planning on distributing it?
Good question, because back in back in 2013, the Kenyan tech community was and the Kenyan startup community was obsessed with mobile apps.
Yeah.
So my good friend Room Thinker
Uh-huh.
used to make this joke of MV2s, like we are all creating MV2s because of the whole hype around M-Pesa,
Yeah.
and so suddenly we had M somethings,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so we're all obsessed with coming up with a mobile app for whatever it was.
Uh-huh.
And so I was part of that. And so for me, um, I began thinking of the solution based on the platform, as opposed to what exactly am I looking to do,
Mm-hmm.
and are there various vehicles or channels that I can use for that. So I became very married to the format.
Uh-huh.
And so I set out. I was like, I want to get a software developer who can develop a mobile app.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because back in the day, there were more Android users than there were Apple users or
Still
iPhone
the same.
users.
It's still the same.
And it's still the same, actually. And even in terms of expertise,
Mm-hmm.
the software developers and the mobile developers who were there, a lot of them were only knowledgeable on Android,
Yeah.
of an Android platform. And so I looked around, asked around in the iHub community. I was referred to Skyline. All right. So
Oh my
Skyline.
gosh. Yes.
So
Everyone
Sky
refers everyone to Skyline.
they're awesome people.
Yes,
Oh
they
my God.
are.
I've had one of the best experiences, and also very challenging moments
Yeah.
with them, because now when I approach them, Houston and the team,
Yes.
when I approach Houston, and I explain this is what I want to do, and I need you guys to help me. And so right from designing the app itself, the logo,
Mm-hmm.
everything actually that we developed for Safari Tales,
Mm-hmm.
it's a Skyline team that did that.
Right.
Up to the designing the app itself, the features, and what is it called? I think they call it the UI UX. So that's
Yes,
basically the
yes.
user interface and the user experience.
Yeah.
They did all that.
Mm-hmm.
But then the vision that I had was it was going to be an interactive multimedia mobile app that would enable children to access stories,
Mm-hmm.
and songs,
Mm-hmm.
in a way that, um, if they were using a tablet or a mobile phone and they went to the app, they could be able to play. And so
Mm-hmm.
when they tap the play button, the story, there's a narrator who's telling the story, and they could also choose the option of, I don't want the story narrated to me, I want to read it for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And we also, I think, at some point looked at the option of, can we have a small smiley that goes up on every of
What?
the words as the
Yeah.
story is being read.
Yeah.
And I know I was asking for a lot, but I had seen other apps, storytelling apps in the field, and I was like, this is what I want. And they're like, okay, we'll make it happen.
Wait, I have questions. I have so many questions. So, so you're doing this at a time when we're still battling with the whole theory of what is the internet and what can it do for us? We still don't have that much coverage in this country at that point in time. Data costs are still, perceivably high.
It's true.
We, I think we only had Wi-Fi networks in offices back then. This whole at-home Wi-Fi seemed a little bit out of reach for those of us who didn't have
It was
millions.
completely out of reach. That was in
Yes.
2013.
Yes,
Even
yes.
I didn't have
Wi-Fi in the house.
Wi-Fi in the house.
So then the two levels of testing this hypothesis here, you needed to test the content, then you needed to test the app. Did you test any of them, or did you just go with your instinct in terms of what it is that you needed to do?
Um, so yes, there was a hypothesis, and
Yes.
I knew that the app was way ahead of its time,
Yes.
but I still wanted to do it because I knew it was experimental, and I
Mm-hmm.
knew we'd have lots of failures before we got it right.
Yes.
And so I wanted to have enough lead time
Mm-hmm.
to be able to experiment, fail fast.
Yeah.
I know I've stolen that from some company, but we wanted to fail fast and just to figure
Yeah.
out things and work it out. Because one of the things that we knew is that we had not seen the vast majority of Kenyans get onto the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we knew that was going to happen. We
Yeah.
knew because of the challenge of low cost smartphones.
Yeah.
Smartphones back then were still quite expensive, but
Yeah.
we knew that there was a time that smartphone costs were going to come down. There was a time that internet data costs were going to come down,
Mm-hmm.
and there would be a time that Kenyans would just be spending all their
Yeah.
time online,
Mm-hmm.
including children.
Yes.
And that is happening right now.
Yes.
Yes.
But it's
So,
2023 though. That's
but that
but
was 10 years. You're
okay.
right.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
So then what happened next? But because the other question I have is, how are you funding all of this? Because this doesn't come cheap. That the an entire dev team is quite expensive. So how are you funding this?
Oh, this is all from pocket.
Oh wow, you were really passionate about it.
This was
Like,
all from pocket.
yeah.
As I said, it's something that I had thought about
Mm-hmm.
for a while. And so by the time I was going to Houston
Mm-hmm.
and his team and telling them, this is what I want to do, I
Mm-hmm.
had saved up
Okay.
quite a
Okay.
lot.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, I was at East African Educational Publishers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of what informed my fire and drive to get this app out there is because I was looking at the publishing industry.
Uh-huh.
I was sitting right there where the
Yes.
action was.
Yeah.
And and I think there's a particular moment that sort of made this very sort of like lit a fire under me. I was the IT manager for East African educational publishers,
Mm-hmm.
and around that time, I think in 2012, Google came calling.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the time, I don't know if you remember, Google had this huge project of Google Books where they wanted to digitize each and every book on the planet. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes.
And they were just digitizing books even without seeking permission. They were like, "We
Yeah.
will digitize, and then if you sue us, we'll
Yeah.
deal with it."
Yeah.
So I had been following what was happening in the publishing space, in the tech space, and so I went and spoke to the company founder, Dr. Chakava, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I think we should get ahead of this. Let's
Yeah.
partner with Google and have our books digitized.
Mm-hmm.
And so, having been part of that and a part of that project, and having, I think it's Isis Nyong'o on the other side, because
Yes.
back then she was working with Google.
Uh-huh.
Just being able to see how Google was approaching this whole aspect about knowledge and content, that is what actually made me, want to focus on the venture.
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, I saved up.
Yeah.
And because a lot of the times when you share your vision with other people and you want people to buy in, sometimes because they're not seeing the vision from the perspective that you're seeing it,
Mm-hmm.
of course, a lot of people will be skeptical.
Yes.
And I got a lot of that.
Yeah.
And so I was prepared for that. And and what that did is that it prepared me psychologically, because I knew I'm going to do this alone for a while
Mm-hmm.
until I have a proof of concept, and that
Yes.
was the pilot.
Yes.
And once we have an app out there
Mm-hmm.
that people can actually download and use and be like, "Oh, this is what you were talking about.
Yes.
Why didn't you tell us?"
Yeah.
But all along, you had been trying to explain what it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And but I wasn't. I wasn't scared. I was actually
Mm-hmm.
more excited than scared about the
Right.
prospect of you sinking in all this money for something that you're not even sure, like, whether it's going to work or not.
So did you quit your, because I mean the passion is so big. There's no way you can do this and a job at the same time.
Oh yeah, it got to that point.
Uh-huh. Ah.
We quickly got to that point because what I haven't mentioned is that apart from just having the Skyline team, them
Mm-hmm.
they were handling the technical aspect. Remember, this is content that was raw. So I'll give you an example. There's a story about Mzee Kenyatta's prophecy
Yeah.
that is told in the pilot app, and also some songs that were incorporated. I wish I'd come with the tab with
Mm-hmm.
with the app, and because it's still in one of my tablets. So for some of these songs, I actually went to my nursery school teacher
Mm-hmm. Oh.
and asked her to write for me all the nursery rhymes that we learned.
Yeah.
And when she did that, then I looked for Zamaleo.
Mm-hmm.
Zamaleo are a group of storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
And I told them, I want us to record this. And this is the way I want us to do it. I want us to come up with a script. I want us to tell the story. And in between the story, there needs to be a
Yes.
song session.
Yeah.
Now, and then I went to Ketebul because we needed a studio.
I mean, I'm just hearing costs piling,
Yeah,
piling,
not
piling.
even just costs, the work, because there needed
Yeah.
to be you needed to be a producer, there needed to be
Yeah.
I don't know what all those terms are, but
Yeah.
someone who instructs the people. Yes, the people are there, but they need to be told, what are we doing, how are we doing it.
Yes.
So there's the
Yes.
scripting, there's
Yeah.
you booking the studio, recording. Even at
Yeah.
some point, I think you even hear me in some of the stories and some of the songs, because a lot of the voice actors are like, we don't know this song. And it's one of those Kikuyu songs, and I'm like, okay, I'll sing it. But
Okay.
yes, there's a lot of cost involved, because engaging Zamaleo,
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to buy potential or
Yes. Yeah.
and vision and be
Yeah.
like, okay, we'll show up for free.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I still had to pay them and the illustrator, because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those stories needed to be illustrated.
Mhm.
Because remember, for every chapter that you have, and you
Yes.
have the text at the bottom, it needs to be accompanied by an image. And
Yes.
that needed to be a very nice, colorful illustration.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah. So why did you feel the need to quit? Like because
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't respond to your question. I got caught up in the moment.
yeah.
When that all that became a lot, as you know, as I've mentioned,
Mhm.
it was not just demanding in terms of money, but also in terms of time.
Mhm.
And so I soon realized that I was not being fair to my employer.
Mhm.
Whereas I could do some of the things after hours or over the
Mhm.
weekends, it quickly became untenable.
Yeah.
And so I had to make the hard decision of quitting. I actually explained, even before I wrote my resignation letter, I went to my boss and I told them, look, I have started this venture. It's taking off. I believe so much in it. I see the potential. But at the same time, I feel like I'm not giving my all.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I'm requesting to leave and fully focus on this.
Mhm.
And they completely understood. I even got a farewell party.
Oh, that
Yeah.
is so
And
sweet.
yes, and I received a lot of goodwill even
Mhm.
up to this day from Kiarie Kamau and his team, and
Yes.
I'm forever grateful for that.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Okay, so I assume you're walking in with a lot of excitement and, this thing is going to be big. And because you've got your background in marketing, pushing it is not going to be a problem. And then you have a lot of friends who are in the media space. So pushing it is not going to be, as in everything looks good on paper.
Oh yes.
So what
Oh
happened?
yes, and it did. Oh my God, all that marketing because
Yeah.
remember, all my friends are, we started out as bloggers together, and then
Yeah.
they've built their own platforms, and
Yeah.
now suddenly they are all their own media entities. I mean, I'm
Yes.
talking about Tech Quiz, Martin, and
Mm-hmm.
and Tech Moran,
Mm-hmm.
and Wamadai.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they heard that I had this venture, they're like, we want to write about it. And so if you go online and you look for Safari Tales, you will see a lot of articles from them on this. And they were really excited because um, we we were at a time when um, a lot of my blogging friends were still trying to find their space in the media in
Mm-hmm.
the media space. And so to be able to actually build something tangible and to be able to develop something that was different from what was there was really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
But um, amidst all that, we've I forgot the fundamentals.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't so much forgetting as I I had so much faith in the tech space
Mm-hmm.
that I I was willing to cut them a lot of slack.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what I mean by that is we got to a point when Houston and his team came to me and were like, you know what? Um, we are not able to make this work the way that you want it. We're struggling with the app. This is what you wanted the app to be able to do,
Mm-hmm.
and we got in and started doing development, knowing fully well that we'd be able to implement, but
Mm-hmm.
we're not able to. And I'm really glad that they came to me and were honest about it.
Yeah.
And by the time they were handing back the app, the way in which they were able to develop it, um, you know um, I understood what
Mm-hmm.
the challenge that they were facing, and so I had to go back into the market and look for a tech developer
Wait,
or
so
look for an Android developer.
what was the problem exactly? Was it something to do with the market, or was it
It
something?
wasn't the market, it was the product.
Okay,
It was the
it was
product.
too sophisticated.
Yes, it was.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And so that whole aspect of it being a multimedia storytelling app, the capabilities of a child being able to
Yeah,
select the stories, and it pulling from a database of a
yeah,
catalog of, and knowing when the story starts and when the songs come in, and
yeah.
and all those things. It was I'm not sure whether it was the tech that wasn't there or
Yeah.
the expertise,
Yeah.
but there was something that
Okay.
wasn't ready and wasn't there, and
Yeah.
they couldn't be able to pull a rabbit out of the hat.
Hmm.
So they just came to me and they're like, "Well, we've
It's
done
hard.
as much as we can. The user interface was awesome,
Yes.
but the user experience was awful.
It was
Yeah,
bumpy.
it
Yeah.
kept it kept hanging. It had
Yeah.
bugs and things like that,
Yeah.
and so and that is where now the character development started.
Okay. Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
um so I went and I began looking for a developer. And despite being very clear about this is what the Skyline team has been able to do, this is what I want the app to be able to do, and these are the examples of apps that are doing similar things that I would like to adopt.
Yeah.
So what would happen is that I would be referred to a developer. I'd be told, "Ah, this is an awesome Android developer. He's the best that we have." So I'd meet with the developer. We'd agree on this
Yeah.
is what I want. They'd be like, and I ask, "Do you have the capability? Do you think it's something that you can be able to do?" They'd agree. We'd draw up a contract. They'd begin work. We'd agree on the timelines. We'd even agree on the payment and how we're going to spread out the payment,
Mm-hmm.
because of course you're not going to pay everything
Yeah.
upfront before
Yeah.
anything has been delivered, and they're also not going to commit time and effort before you've made a commitment.
True.
And so what would happen is that the very first developer that I worked with after Skyline, that is basically what happened. And
Mm-hmm.
we had drawn up a contract. They began on the work, and then somewhere along the way they got stuck.
Oh, same problem as Kelly. Okay. Uh-huh. So,
So remember, I've already sunk in
yes.
down payment.
Yes.
I'm not going to get that money back.
Uh-huh.
And I've wasted time
Mm-hmm.
because they wasted my time because they promised that they would deliver. I had been very clear on what it is that I'm looking for and what it is that Skyline was not able to achieve. And so
Mm-hmm.
the whole reason why they were being brought was to solve what
Yes.
Skyline was not able to achieve, and
Mm-hmm.
and that still didn't happen. And think for me the breaking point was, and I haven't spoken publicly about this,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not sure, um, because I want I want to mention names,
Okay.
but we'll
Yeah.
talk about that. Let me talk about the experience. I think for me the breaking point
Uh-huh.
was the last. So I went through two other two other developers, and then the third one is that was a breaking point for me.
Okay.
It was a breaking point for me because um, the the amount of commitment and also the amount of money that
Mm-hmm.
that I spent on that, and just the way in which the whole experience happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now that I look back at it, I realize that I was conned
Ah, right.
by someone very respectable,
Mm-hmm.
had someone who had come very, very highly recommended,
Mm-hmm.
someone who I had sat down with and like I had really explained and given all my frustrations of this is what
Yeah.
everyone else that I've worked with, this is what has happened, and I'm coming to you as a last resort. I am running out of money,
Mm-hmm.
and this needs to work. And they're like, yeah, we'll do everything. You don't have to worry.
Uh-huh.
And we even drew up a contract because what I learned with a lot of these things, you can't just do gentleman's handshake or
Yeah.
gentleman's agreement. You have to stipulate, and especially when it comes to development, you
Yes.
really have to put it down on paper. What exactly are the two of you delivering? What are they expected to deliver, and what are you expected to deliver?
True.
So despite that, the guy walked with around quarter of an M,
Hey.
and
Do
I
you,
never got a product.
what?
Yes,
Oh my, but what had he promised you? Like, had he looked at the prototype and
yes,
said, I can develop it?
yes.
Or did he say I was going to start it from scratch? No, he said I can improve, I can definitely
No,
do.
he trashed the previous version.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And said he was going to
And he's
start
like, I
from.
don't even know who did this for you. This looks very amateur, and I believe I can do better. There's even something called augmented reality. Have you ever heard of it? I
Oh,
can be able to actually add augmented reality aspects to it, and Yeah, I bought into it.
Yeah, conmen
Yeah.
usually it's a, I mean, it's a confidence trickster game, you know. They have to make you feel confident in them. So
True, but you always think that you can see a con
yeah.
as it happens,
Mm-hmm.
um, but not when it comes from a very trusted
Mm.
and verified source. Like this was a referral.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
was a very a referral that had come like from a very trusted source,
Mm-hmm.
and
It didn't work
it
out.
didn't work out.
Were there ever any other complaints about this person? Did you find out later?
To be honest,
Yeah.
I that whole experience was traumatizing.
Yeah.
I didn't um I didn't go around asking, do you know this person?
Yeah.
Has this ever happened to anyone?
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, the first instinct and the only instinct was to just
Yeah.
retreat.
Yeah.
Remember, I had been out of a job for a year.
Mm-hmm.
I had put everything into this venture,
Mm-hmm.
and it became a source of a lot of friction between myself and my husband,
Yeah.
because I'm the kind of person that if I hold on to something, I will die with it.
Mm-hmm.
And despite him cautioning me, oh, you're putting a lot of money into this. I think you need to sort of take a step back and reassess. I was like, no, this has to work.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So for me now to go back and be like,
Maybe perhaps you were right.
I've just been conned.
Yeah.
That was hard for me.
Yeah.
That was hard for me. And so I think one thing about failure is that we never like talking about it or even
True.
acknowledging, because now when you're going to tell people, oh, I got con, of course it's going to reflect on your character, and you
Yeah.
don't want that.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was, I decided to forget about it, and I was like, okay, let me start looking for a job.
Okay. And what do you know how much you had lost in total in this venture? Because remember, you've still got the content that you've paid
Yep.
for. So is there a total sum? Uh,
Yes, there is.
Would you please tell us?
It came to something around 2 million.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I would need a break after that. So I do hope you went off took some time to
Completely,
think. Yeah.
for 10 years.
10 years.
Yes.
Okay. Before you came back to the part, but even just getting back to life, like figuring out, okay, what's the next step? That would take me some time to
Yeah,
process.
it did.
Mm-hmm.
It did. But I needed a distraction,
Yeah.
something to keep me busy,
Mm-hmm.
and at the same time, something that is completely different.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I went back into employment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where did you work?
So that was in 2017.
Maybe about 24. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yes, 2017 is when I went back,
Mm-hmm.
and I got a job with Geopol.
Okay.
It was very different from what I had been doing before. It was a mobile research company. Um, I was going to be doing their digital marketing and
Mm-hmm.
their PR,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it offered that break and that room to just
Yeah.
do something different.
Yeah. But I can imagine that thinking about Safari Tales would have caused you a lot of pain in the
I didn't
interim.
even want to hear the mention of the name.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So it's back and it's alive.
It's back.
What happened? Yani umepigwa character development ukarudi. Okay, sawa. This we have to know.
Nimerudi. Um, and it took a lot of soul searching.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it took a lot of soul searching and just acknowledging the beats that were my own fault.
Yeah.
And that was hard.
Mm-hmm.
Because no one likes to self-criticize or even that's just acknowledge
Mm-hmm.
that yes, this was a failure on my part, and yes, I there was an oversight there, and I could have done better here and there. Um, But for me, the love for folklore and that passion to document and digitize children's folklore has always been there. It stuck with me, even after Safari Tales. And I think just one of an interesting thing happened. So when we were developing the app, I bought a tablet specifically for that, because we needed to test, and we needed to test the app in different environments. We needed to
Mm-hmm.
test it on a phone, and we needed to test it on a tablet, because
Yeah.
those are the two platforms in which it was going to primarily be used.
Mm-hmm.
Now, interestingly, the version on the tablet, it is there to this day.
Wow.
And now, when my kids were born and they started using it, they would always go back to that app.
Mm-hmm.
And every time they'd play one of the stories, as I mentioned, it's called Mzee Kenyatta's prophecy. I don't know if you know the story.
Uh-huh.
And as I mentioned, there's a part where I sing one of the songs, and so they'd always remind me, "Mom, we can hear you singing." And so I think that helped me, just removing myself from the pain
Yeah.
of, this is what I went through to deliver this, to seeing them appreciate
Yeah.
the app and the stories
Mm-hmm.
just for what they were.
Yeah.
That helped me get through it. And it's one of those very subtle things, because they'd play it in the background. I wouldn't go to, I never went to the app and they're like, oh, let's play this and just be very nostalgic about it. I wouldn't. It would just be in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that, after our firstborn came, and then we had our secondborn in 2013, then we had our thirdborn in 2016, and the that quest for my children to learn, appreciate their culture, has always stayed with me.
Right.
All right, has always stayed with me and my husband. And so, um, and so, because that need is always there, and then you realize there's still a void,
Mm-hmm.
because with when they're growing up, I'd look for storybooks, and you're not finding as many storybooks of African,
Yeah.
children, as there are for,
Mm-hmm.
European or American children, Western stories. And that would, at the back of my mind, that would trigger something. I'm like, there's still a need. There's
Yeah.
still a need. We still need more stories where children can see themselves in the characters and their environments and things like that. And so last year is when this whole idea of, I started warming up to the idea of, what, this, I can actually be able to do this again. And it
Mm-hmm.
happened in a very subtle way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's this YouTube channel that I came across, and it features well-known American personalities reading storybooks
Mm-hmm.
to children, and it's being filmed, and that whole story reading session is filmed. And I was like, I can actually be able to do that. But then what I will do is that I will get well-known Kenyan personalities to read storybooks in their mother tongue
Oh.
for children
Ay, ay, ay,
with
ay,
translation. So here we have Wayua.
don't ever ask me to do that. Don't,
Wayua
just
speaks, apart from English. So we'll assume we'll assume that Wayua also reads, is very good in reading Kikuyu.
uh,
And so we will give her a storybook
yeah.
that is, and all this was scripted. So we'll give her a storybook to read. And so the first paragraph that she's reading is in Kikuyu, but then it's quickly followed by a translation in English, and it's all dramatized.
Okay.
And so that is how the idea of Tusome Hadithi
Mm-hmm.
podcast came about last year.
Mm-hmm.
And so I reached out to a gentleman that I had worked with in my last employment,
Mm-hmm.
the videographer then, and I sold to him the vision, and he was like, "Yeah, let's do it."
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why he was sold on to it is because I had worked with him and he had seen my passion, and I kept talking about, oh yeah, I'm so passionate about African culture, and what we leave, the legacy that we leave for our children.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I sold to him the concept, he was willing to come in with his equipment, with his team,
Mm-hmm.
and he was like, "You do the whole production thing, script writing, source
Mm-hmm.
for the storytellers, and I'll come and record.
Mhm.
And so I went all out. I went looked for Eric Wainaina. I looked for Susan Owiyo. I looked for Caroline Mutoko.
Uh-huh.
Who else? Silayo.
Oh wow.
And the roaming chef. I'm forgetting his name, which I'll remember in a
Ombachi.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
Uh-huh.
And I told them, this is the idea that I have, and I'd like you to come and read a story,
Mhm.
and I'll script it for you, and and this is and I don't have money. I
Uh-huh.
remember I remember Caroline laughing. Is like, oh, okay. But I like the idea, but I can't read in Kikamba. You'd have to talk to Chipukizi. So she referred me to Chipukizi, and I
Yeah.
had Chipukizi come on. And so we were able to shoot five episodes,
Yeah.
and we're able to feature five stories read in five Kenyan languages.
Oh wow.
Yes.
So which celebrities finally, said yes to
Oh, so
this
all the ones that
exposure?
I've mentioned. So we
Okay.
had Eric Wainaina.
Yeah.
It was a very interesting conversation with Eric, because Eric was like, "My Kikuyu is
Questionable.
kaudo funny." I was like, "Don't worry, we'll do language lessons." And
Yeah.
so
Hmm.
we did several takes before the actual day of the recording.
Yeah.
So he recorded himself. He sent me, and I'm like, "No, that one you don't pronounce it like that."
Yeah.
So Eric did he did a story in Kikuyu.
Hmm.
Caroline did a story in Kiswahili.
Okay.
Susanna did a story in the Luo.
Yeah.
Chipukizi did a story in Kikamba.
Hmm.
Silayo did a story in
Uh-huh.
Kimasai.
Wow.
And I don't know why I keep forgetting.
Ombachi, Dennis.
Ombachi,
Yes.
Dennis, did a story. He's like, I can't speak Swahili. So I was like, okay, just read the story in English.
Oh,
But it's a story book written by a Kenyan
okay.
writer,
Mm-hmm.
Melissa Waku.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, we'll compromise on that, and we'll just have you Kenya read a storybook written by a Kenyan writer.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, those are the stories that we've featured in the first um, season of Tusome Hadithi podcast.
When does the second season come out?
We don't know yet.
Okay. All right. But because I assume this
I
is
don't know yet, because right now we are fundraising.
okay.
Because
Okay.
it was the first was a pilot. We
Okay.
needed to prove that it can be done,
Mm-hmm.
but then there were a lot of costs
Yeah.
because of production.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were like, okay, the concept works. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's start fundraising. So
Mm-hmm.
now we're still fundraising for season 2.
All right. How's that going?
Yes. It's going.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll talk about that on the side up Kando United.
Yes.
But what lessons did you take from your first experience that have gotten you this far? Because I see that the two concepts are wildly different in that this one is extremely pared down, hugely practical. You're not forcing yourself to do things or hit certain deadlines or polish things in a particular way. I sense that you're
Mm.
working more with your spirit and your soul, than you are with, eh, I suppose the look and feel and the mujiza of having a
Mhm.
great app. And I could be wrong. Maybe I'm just loading feelings into your
No,
heart.
you're right.
But okay, yeah. So tell us in your words, like what lessons did you take?
Um, so I think those 10 years, a lot has happened in terms of just um my maturity as a creative,
Hmm.
and just being real, and being realistic about what is practical and what is not. Because when you're young, you tend to be, your head is all, above, on the clouds, and you're like, yeah, these things can happen. This
Yeah.
app needs to be able to do this. But then when I think when you grow older, you have a better appreciation of you know things don't always work, and
Hmm.
sometimes it's good to be practical,
Hmm.
and you don't have to you don't have to break the bank, or lose your soul just to deliver something perfect.
Hmm.
And also sharing your vision, and having other people come on and sharing that vision, that was an important lesson.
Hmm.
And even with Afro Kids, um, and taking it off the ground. The other was just being realistic about not everyone is seeing your vision. Like
Mhm.
sometimes you I'll give an example of you have the vision of offering someone a cup, but you're like, oh, this cup has to be gold and it has to have all this, but you're forgetting it's not the cup, it's the content in the cup.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So whether you're going to give that cup and whatever content it is in a mabati,
Mhm.
as long as whatever it is that you're giving is the cup is able to hold,
Mhm.
then people will appreciate. And that is what I learned.
Mhm.
The first time I went for this, this China cup that was very expensive, and
Yes.
once it breaks, it breaks.
Yeah.
But then the second time round, I was like, okay, perhaps even a mabati cup, which is cheaper, can
Mhm.
still get the job done,
Mhm.
and it doesn't dilute from what is inside the cup.
Mhm.
Yes.
Woo! So, are you going to be building another app soon? Do you think?
No.
Okay.
Me and apps are done. Yes.
Yeah. Oh my God, that is such a fantastic story of, learning hugely because it is entrepreneurial journey for so many of us. You open shop, you want, the C-suite in this really expensive office block because you have to impress your clients. Then you forget that actually you don't even have clients yet to impress.
Yes,
And
that's true.
then that's how the business dies for a lot of people. Or you start a media project and invest in your look and feel and forget that you need the content,
Oh,
you
right.
know?
You're right.
So,
Oh my God.
so I mean, this is such a great lesson for people in the tech world, for people, because again, we've seen a lot of closures in the tech industry, you know, because of things like these. Yeah. Content creators have a lot to learn from you. I mean, this is absolutely fantastic. So you're going to tell us where we can find Tusome Hadithi, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
where do we find it?
Yes. So Tusome Hadithi is one of the initiatives for Afro Kids,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's also good to mention that Afro Kids, which founded in 2013 as a limited liability company, I
Mm-hmm.
quickly, not quickly, with time learned that that was the wrong vehicle
Mm-hmm.
for it, and it's important that I speak about that because for an initiative or so for something that is in the cultural space, it's good to be aware of is it something that you're looking for it to become commercially viable,
Right.
and because you cannot commercialize traditional knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
then which is the best vehicle that you
Yes.
can use? Because at the end of the day, you're not looking to make profit. Yes, you're looking to be sustainable,
Mm-hmm.
but most importantly, you're actually looking to. This is more for posterity,
Mm-hmm.
all right? And this is communal.
Yeah.
This is communal knowledge that you want to preserve.
Yes.
And so this, I think this last year rather,
Mm-hmm.
began transitioning Afro Kids into a trust. So as we
Okay.
speak, our lawyers have the papers and they're processing that,
Mm-hmm.
and that was important for us to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, as I mentioned, to Some Hadithi is a project within AfroKids.
Mm-hmm.
It is available both in video and audio format. So, if you go to
Okay.
YouTube, you look for Tusome Hadithi,
Mm-hmm.
or you go to any of the podcasting platforms, you will be able to access the stories.
Mm-hmm.
And the other initiative that we're also running is the Kids Lit Club,
Mm-hmm.
in collaboration with Baraza Media Lab,
Yeah.
which is still around storytelling because I love storytelling. It's storytelling for children.
Yeah.
So think of Tusome Hadithi,
Yeah.
the live version in front of an audience.
Right.
So what we're doing, because we're passionate about storytelling, and what we've seen is that there are not that many children's book writers, and the few that are there, they don't have platforms where they can be able to share their work or even
Mm-hmm.
get known. So that is what we are doing with Baraza, featuring African writers of children's books,
Uh-huh.
and holding readings and discussions around the stories
Mm-hmm.
every second month.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. You let us know when the next one is up.
Well, the next one is on the 27th
Okay.
of this month of May.
Okay.
Yes.
We'll make sure we're there, right?
Right.
And if you would like extra details on how you can attend, please log on to the social media handles that you see on the screen in front of you. Thank you so much for your time and for such a wonderful conversation, for your bubbly energy. My gosh, you're so much fun to talk to, you know? Like, let no one ever lie to you, otherwise,
Mhm.
you're a lot of fun. So,
Thank you.
on that note, thank you for joining us for this conversation and see you next time for another one just like this one.